Hey guys, tonight we are stepping straight into the dusty, sunlit rhythms of ancient Egypt. Picture this, the wide Nile glistening in the early dawn, reeds swaying with a breeze that smells faintly of wet earth, and you, yes, you, groggily opening your eyes to a world that has not changed for centuries. Honestly, you probably would not survive 5 minutes without your morning coffee. But somehow this farmer does it every single day, without complaint, without a snooze button, and without an air-conditioned escape. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are at it, I would love to know where you are watching from and what time it is right now. Drop that in the comments, because it always fascinates me to imagine someone in London at midnight and someone in Delhi at 3 in the morning, both drifting off to the same dusty Egyptian sunrise. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice, lying on your woven reed mat, is the subtle shift in light filtering through the gaps in your mud brick walls. The Nile does not just give life to your crops, it tells you when to wake, when to sow, and when to rest. Without clocks, without alarms, you live by the rhythm of water and sky. You stretch your arms, brushing a bit of straw from your rough linen tunic, and step into the crisp morning air. There is a rooster crowing somewhere in the distance, but more important is the faint, rhythmic lapping of water against the banks. That sound is as close to certainty as life ever gives you. Some mornings, you almost trick yourself into thinking you have control. You might glance across the floodplain and think, yes, this year will be generous. The river has swelled enough. But other mornings remind you of your place. Too little water and famine lurks. Too much and whole fields drown. Historians still argue whether the people truly saw the Nile as a benevolent god or as a moody force that simply had to be appeased with rituals and offerings. Whatever the truth, you do not spend too long pondering theology when your stomach growls. You wrap a woven cord around your waist, not for fashion, but to hold your loose tunic in place. The floor beneath your bare feet feels cool, packed mud smoothed over countless times by calloused soles. Outside, the village is stirring. Thin plumes of smoke rise from hearths as your neighbors prepare the same breakfast you are about to eat. Dogs bark lazily, goats bleat, and the faint braying of a donkey punctuates the otherwise calm morning. The sun itself is a character here, not a background detail. It lifts itself above the eastern horizon like a golden promise and a golden threat. You squint, knowing that within a few hours that gentle glow will turn into a merciless glare. But for now, it is soft, painting the mud brick walls with warm hues. Children run past you, their laughter sharp in the morning stillness, carrying small clay jars to fetch water. One of them pauses to wave before scampering off, feet leaving tiny prints in the dust. You take a deep breath. The air is filled with that curious blend of earthy dampness and dry dust, two opposites coexisting because of the river's gift. The land right beside the Nile feels rich and fertile, while just a little farther out stretches endless desert. shimmering already with heat, even though it is still morning. The starkness is always striking. One step to the left, life. One step to the right, death. And you live balanced on that thin strip of green. There is always work waiting, but there is also ritual in these first moments. A few words muttered under your breath to thank Hopi, the god of the Nile, for his generosity. It is not elaborate, not priestly, just a whisper. You look at the river and imagine it listening. Some days you suspect it does. Some days you are not so sure. That uncertainty itself is oddly comforting. Quirky fact, here did you know that Egyptians once experimented with crocodile dung as a form of sunscreen? Yes, someone actually smeared that on their skin to block out the blazing sun. You, thankfully, just adjust the folds of your tunic and hope for the best. Protection, in your world, is more about shade and timing than innovation. Your ox stirs nearby, snorting softly, tethered to a post. You pat its rough hide in passing. This creature is not just muscle, it is survival. Without it, the plough would barely scratch the soil. You glance back at your home's simple walls, a flat roof where you sometimes sleep on hotter nights, and little else. But it is enough. Enough to shelter, enough to anchor, enough to remind you that you belong somewhere. By now, the village is fully awake. Women kneel by the river, scrubbing clay pots with sand. Men gather tools, exchanging a few half-serious complaints about aching backs. An older neighbor tells the same story he has told every week, about the time he supposedly met a priest who could predict the floods perfectly. You smile politely. Everyone knows the story changes slightly each telling, and everyone knows it is probably nonsense. But traditions matter. You look east again, at the widening brightness of the sky. The day stretches before you, long and predictable, yet never entirely safe. And here is the part that always makes you chuckle silently. All of this, every donkey bray, every splash of water, every whispered prayer, would someday be painted on temple walls or scribbled on papyrus, as if it were grand history. But you know the truth, it is simply life. Ordinary, repetitive, stubbornly resilient life. And with that thought, you pick up your walking stick, adjust your corded belt, and take your first steps toward the fields, toward work, toward another day beneath the endless Egyptian sun. You make your way down the narrow path that snakes between mud brick houses, your stomach rumbling with that familiar morning emptiness. Breakfast is not glamorous, and no one pretends otherwise. It is simple fuel, meant to get you through hours of back-breaking work. You duck under the low lintel of your neighbor's doorway to share a quick word. And you are immediately hit with the rich, sour-sweet smell of beer brewing. Not the foamy, frosty beer you might crave today, but a thick, porridge-like drink, cloudy and heavy. To you, it is as normal as water. On a woven mat lies coarse bread, made from emmer wheat that has been ground between stone querns. You break off a piece, the texture gritty because small flecks of sand always manage to creep in during the grinding process. Every Egyptian carries that taste of sand in their teeth. It wears them down over the years. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians suffered more from malnutrition or from their teeth literally grinding away due to stone dust in bread. Either way, you chew carefully, enjoying the slight crunch, even though you know it is not entirely good for you. Next to the bread, a bunch of green onions rests on a clay plate, their sharp smell cutting through the heavier aroma of barley mash. You tear into one, the pungent bite making your eyes water for a moment. This is breakfast, the ancient version of fast food. Bread, onions, beer. It might sound unappealing, but for you it is the comforting taste of survival. Your neighbor laughs as he pours beer into a cup for himself, making a joke about how his wife waters it down so much that the gods themselves would send it back. You chuckle and raise your own piece of bread in mock salute. These small exchanges of humor matter more than the meal itself. Without them, mornings would be nothing but aching bones, an endless routine. The children, still rubbing sleep from their eyes, pick at dried dates and figs. Their sticky fingers leave smears on the walls, which no one bothers to wipe away. A clay bowl of salted fish appears from the corner. It smells strong enough to make your nose twitch. You nibble on a piece, feeling that balance of flavor, salty, sour, grainy, that defines your diet. No one here talks about variety or delicacy. Every bite is about endurance. And yet, in its own way, this breakfast is sacred. It ties you to your ancestors who ate the same combination of bread and beer centuries ago. And it ties you to your gods, who expect you to honor life by sustaining it. Priests may chant in grand temples, but in your house the chant is the crunch of bread and the slurp of beer. You sit on a low stool, feeling the uneven ground beneath your feet. Dust drifts in shafts of sunlight as your neighbor's wife sweeps with a bundle of palm fronds. The sound is soft, rhythmic, almost like a lullaby, in reverse, something to wake you rather than put you to sleep. One quirky tidbit about breakfast you might not know. The ancient Egyptians sometimes flavored their beer with dates to sweeten it, though this was usually reserved for special occasions. Imagine, then, how exotic and luxurious it would feel to taste something so subtly sweet in a world where sugar did not exist. You dream about it now and then, but most mornings your beer is thick, tart, and honest. You catch yourself looking at the river through the open doorway. Its surface glints like beaten copper in the rising light. You know that beyond those waters lies the possibility of danger hippos, lurking with their jaws wide enough to snap a canoe in two. Crocodiles sliding like shadows. Yet here you are, taking them for granted, barely sparing them a thought while chewing your bread. The world is both dangerous and familiar, and that duality sits quietly in your mind as you eat. Your wife sets a jug of water on the mat, reminding you with a pointed look to drink. The work ahead will not forgive carelessness. You take a long gulp, coolness sliding down your throat, and for a moment you feel gratitude. The Nile not only feeds your crops, it fills your clay jar, quenches your thirst, and cools your tongue. Around you, the hum of morning builds. Someone outside shouts at a stubborn donkey. Another laughs at the commotion. A rooster crows again, this time louder, as though determined to make up for any sleepers who dared ignore him earlier. The air is alive with motion and sound. yet none of it feels rushed. You all know your day will be long. There is no hurry. Historians still argue whether these meals were truly communal, shared with neighbors daily, or whether that was more of a festive thing. But in your lived experience, food is rarely just your own. To share it is to ease the burden, to turn necessity into fellowship. The bowl of salted fish is passed to another family without anyone asking. Bread is torn and handed across the mat. A child tugs on your sleeve, and you hand him the last bite of your onion without thinking. That is just how life works. You wipe your hands on your tunic, brush away a few crumbs, and feel the weight of the day settle on your shoulders. Breakfast is finished, and with it, the last moment of ease you will know until the sun begins to fall again. You stand, stretching stiff joints, and nod to your neighbor. He gives a half smile, already reaching for his hoe. There is no dramatic farewell, no lingering conversation. The land waits, and the land is impatient. You take one last sip of beer, thick and sour on your tongue, and set the cup aside. The path to the fields stretches before you, dusty and familiar. As you step outside, the heat is beginning to rise, but you barely notice it yet. You carry the taste of bread and onions in your mouth, and with it, the faint comfort that no matter how harsh the day, you have started it the same way your ancestors did. And so, with your belly not exactly full, but adequately prepared, you shoulder your walking stick again and head toward the waiting fields, the heartbeat of your existence. You reach the edges of the fields just as the sun climbs higher, the light now sharper, casting long lines across the furrows. The earth looks dark and rich where water has touched it, though only recently. Farther from the canals, the soil already shows cracks, a reminder of how quickly life can slip back into dryness if the Nile is not properly managed. Before anything else, you pause for a moment to survey the land. It is not vanity, it is survival. Every ridge, every clump of weeds, every trace of dampness tells you what kind of day you are about to have. The tools waiting for you are familiar, almost like companions. Leaning against a simple wooden frame is the plough, worn smooth from years of use. It is not the gleaming metal beast you might imagine from later ages, but a humble construction of wood, fastened together with cords of leather. Its blade is not sharp. It merely scratches the soil enough to open it for planting. Attached by a yoke, your ox will do the heavy pulling. You run a hand along the handle, feeling the grooves where generations of palms have pressed. Beside the plough lies your sickle, the curved blade crafted not from iron but from sharpened flint, set into a wooden grip. It feels light, efficient, and slightly fragile all at once. Each stroke during harvest will be a careful balance of forceful, and the flint chips too soft, and the stalks bend instead of breaking clean. You have sharpened it yourself many times, sitting by the fire, rubbing flint edges until your fingers ached. You cannot imagine a day without its weight in your hand. Scattered nearby are baskets woven from reeds, ready to be filled later in the season. They are not empty symbols of promise. They are reminders of responsibility. An overseer's scribe will eventually want to know exactly how many baskets you can fill, because every measure is tied to the taxes you owe. But for now, you tell yourself that the baskets are simply your own tools of sustenance, not of obligation. You set the plow upright, tightening the leather straps. Your ox shifts, stamping the ground, impatient for the routine it knows as well as you do. The animal's breath comes in heavy bursts, and you feel the warmth radiating off its body. You murmur something under your breath, not words exactly, more a sound of reassurance. The bond between farmer and beast is unspoken but strong. If the ox falters, so do you. Quirky tidbit: ancient Egyptian farmers sometimes named their oxen after gods or noble figures. Not out of reverence, but out of practicality. Imagine calling out, "Come on, Osiris," or "Steady there, Pharaoh," while dragging a plow through sticky mud. It was both humor and habit, a way to give personality to the endless grind of work. You cannot help but smile when you remember your father's ox, affectionately nicknamed Hoppy, who was notorious for refusing to budge unless bribed with extra feed. You begin to guide the plow, pressing the handle down while the ox leans into the harness. The blade carves into the soil with a satisfying crunch, lifting small ridges of damp earth. The smell of freshly turned soil rises, a sharp mineral scent that lingers in your nostrils. Each furrow is like a line written on a clay tablet, a record of your labor. Step by step, row by row, you carve your survival into the land. It is repetitive, yes, but within that repetition lies a kind of peace. The rhythm of steps, the creak of wood, the low grunt of the oxit, all blends into a steady pulse, almost musical. You find your mind wandering as you push forward. Perhaps you think of your children, still young, their laughter still unburdened. Or perhaps you think of your father, who once walked this same strip of land, guiding his own plow. Time feels circular, not linear. What was once his labor is now yours, and someday it will be your son's. Historians still argue whether farmers like you had much freedom over their own land, or whether everything ultimately belonged to the pharaoh. From your perspective, it hardly matters whether you own it or merely rent it from eternity. The soil demands your sweat all the same. Titles and scrolls do not plough furrows. Only you and your ox do. Now and then, the plough snags on a root or a stone, jarring your arms. You mutter a curse, tug the blade free, and carry on. You know every stubborn rock in this field, almost as if they are old adversaries. Each year you swear you will dig them out once and for all, and each year you get too tired to keep that promise. So the rocks remain eternal opponents in your daily contest. You wipe the sweat from your brow with the back of your hand. The sun is climbing higher, already pressing down harder. You glance at the horizon, where the desert begins, and the heat shimmers in waves. It looks empty, but you know that emptiness is deceptive. Beyond that mirage are tombs, caravans, even bandits who sometimes test their luck against lonely travelers. You thank the gods that your life is bound to this green strip by the river, not to the deadly openness of the sands. Your neighbor passes by, leading his own ox, and raises a hand in greeting. The two of you exchange a few brief words about the soil's dampness about how the plough feels heavier than last season. It is not conversation in the modern sense. It is more like two weary acknowledgments that you are not alone in this fight against the earth. Then he moves on, and so do you. By the time you reach the end of the field, your arms ache, your back protests, but your mind feels strangely calm. You look back at the long, straight furrows stretching behind you. They are not just lines in the dirt. They are evidence of your persistence, proof that you have met the morning with work, not with idleness. You pause to catch your breath, leaning on the handle of the plough, and the ox flicks its tail lazily, waiting for your next command. For a fleeting moment, you think of the grand monuments that rise in the distance, the temples and pyramids built with the same hands that plough fields. Some say they will last forever. That stone will outlive all memory. But you know the truth. Without bread and beer, without farmers and ploughs, there would be no stone monuments at all. The gods may receive offerings in golden bowls, but the grain that fills those bowls begins right here, in the furrows you carve beneath the sun. You take a deep breath, steady yourself, and prepare to start another row. The day is only beginning, and the soil will not till itself. The morning has ripened into that crisp, glaring stretch when the shadows shorten, and you know it is time to turn from ploughing to watering. Crops in Egypt are not simply sprinkled and left to fate. They are coaxed, channeled, persuaded into life through one of the oldest dances humans ever performed with nature. Irrigation. The Nile's flood is generous, yes, but it is also wild, and your task is to tame just enough of it to keep barley, wheat, and flax alive. You walk to the edge of the canal, a shallow trench carved by hand with simple hose. Its water shimmers, brown and lively, carrying bits of reed and the occasional darting fish. The canal connects to a larger feeder channel, which in turn feeds from the river itself. Nothing here is accidental. Centuries of farmers like you have scratched these veins into the earth, until the whole floodplain resembles a living body with the Nile as its beating heart. There stands your most important tool for this work, the shadoof. It is a contraption so simple that even a child could understand it, yet ingenious enough to survive millennia. A tall wooden pole, balanced with a crossbeam, holds a leather bucket on one end and a counterweight stone on the other. You grasp the pole, lower the bucket into the water, and, with a push downward and a pull upward, you lift a sloshing load high enough to tip into the canal. Over and over, your arms perform the motion, the bucket dipping, rising, spilling. The rhythm is hypnotic. Lower, scoop, lift, tip. The splash of water hitting the dry canal is sharp and satisfying. Your shoulders ache, but you know the land is drinking. The crops will soon perk up, and that ache is proof of progress. Each splash is like a heartbeat, a reminder that without this labor, the fields would wither under Ra's fire. You glance at your neighbor, who is working his own shadoof just a few steps down. He wipes sweat from his forehead with the hem of his tunic, then grins at you. We lift water for the gods, and they still ask for taxes, he jokes. You laugh softly, nearly losing grip on the pole. The humor is dry, much like the earth you are trying to moisten, but it makes the labor bearable. Historians still argue whether irrigation was fully organized by state officials or largely managed by local communities. From where you stand, it feels like both. Scribes may measure canals, priests may bless the flow, but at the end of the day it is you, the farmer, whose hands grow blistered lifting buckets of water. The canals branch like fingers into the fields. Small mud walls guide the trickle toward each patch of crop. You walk barefoot along these ridges, checking for leaks. Sometimes a wall collapses, spilling water into the wrong area. When it happens, you crouch, press mud between your palms, and rebuild the ridge quickly before too much is lost. You become, for a while, more mason than farmer. A dragonfly skims past your head, wings catching the sunlight like shards of glass. Frogs croak from hidden corners, emboldened by the wet earth. And somewhere, always somewhere, a crocodile waits in deeper water. You know better than to linger at the edges of canals too long. Children are warned with stories, some true, some exaggerated, of people dragged under. One quirky tidbit that always circulates: farmers claimed crocodiles could be distracted if you tossed them a chicken, giving you time to escape. Whether that worked or not, you hope never to find out. You return to the shadoof, muscles already protesting, sweat drips from your temples, stinging your eyes, but you keep going. The water has to move. There is no option of quitting, no thought of maybe later. If the plants go thirsty now, the harvest months from now will punish you. You understand that time in this world is elastic. You work in the present for a future you might not even see. Children scamper around, pretending to help. One balances on the shadoof's wooden frame until you shout, half amused, half angry. Another splashes in the shallow canal, muddying the water you just cleared. Their laughter echoes, mixing with the splashes of your labor in a way you do not mind. Better they grow up learning the tools of survival than chasing idle fantasies. Occasionally, a scribe walks by with his reed pen and tablet, noting which canals flow, which fields are watered. You do not bother greeting him. His eyes are sharp, his face unreadable. He will take his notes back to someone who does not know your name, someone who only sees numbers on papyrus. You return to your lifting, your splashing, because those notes will not fill your baskets come harvest. You pause, stretching your arms, and lean against the shadoof. The sun is higher now, the heat building like an invisible weight pressing down on your shoulders. The smell of wet mud mixes with the dry, grassy scent of growing barley. You look out across the fields, the green rows stretching toward the horizon, and for a brief moment you feel pride. These plants stand because you lifted water, because you guided the river's veins into them. Without you, there would be no bread, no beer, no offering in the temple. You might be nameless, but your labor is everywhere. Historians still argue whether farmers like you saw their work as service to the gods or simply as survival. You know the truth lies somewhere in between. When the barley sways in the breeze, you feel as though the gods are nodding in approval. When the weeds choke out a patch of flax, you feel like they are testing your patience. Either way, you keep going. By midday, your shoulders burn, your palms are raw, and the shadoof creaks like it might splinter. You set the bucket down for a final time and step back, breathing heavily. The canals flow, the crops drink, and for now, at least, you have won another round in the endless dance between man and river. You walk back along the ridges, mud clinging to your ankles, and glance up at the sun. It is merciless now, blazing white, flattening shadows. You sigh, knowing the hardest part of the day still lies ahead, but you also feel a quiet satisfaction. The land is watered. Life will continue, and tomorrow you will do it all again. By now, the morning has slipped into that restless stretch where work has settled into routine. The fields glisten faintly from the irrigation, and the smell of wet mud lingers heavy in the air. As you walk the ridges back towards the village edge, you notice voices carrying over the fields. They are not chants from the temple, not the stern tones of overseers, but the lighter, brighter notes of ordinary chatter. Neighbors gather at the boundaries where their plots meet, leaning on hoes or balancing baskets against their hips. At first, the talk is about work, how stubborn the ox was today, how quickly the canal wall collapsed, how the barley seems shorter this season. But the practical dissolves quickly into gossip, and before long you are standing there too, pretending to rest while your ears soak in the rhythm of the conversation. A man tells of his cousin in another village who was fined twice as much grain by the tax collector. They must have measured with crooked baskets, he insists, earning a round of nods and mutters. Everyone knows the measurements never quite favor the farmer. Someone else chimes in, recalling how last year a neighbor hid a sack of barley under reeds to avoid inspection, only to have it discovered by a wandering goat. The laughter is sharp, cutting the air with the relief of shared misfortune. Historians still argue whether such gossip was a form of resistance, small rebellions against the system, more simply the human urge to trade stories. To you, standing here wiping sweat from your brow, it feels like both. The overseers may own the scrolls and the scales, but you own the laughter. And sometimes, laughter feels heavier than law. A group of women pass carrying baskets of laundry to the river. One pauses to tease a farmer about how his ox seems lazier than he is. He responds with mock indignation, insisting the ox only mirrors its master. The women laugh, shaking their heads, and keep walking. The small sting of the joke softens quickly into amusement. No one can afford grudges here. Survival does not leave room for them. Children hover near the adults, pretending not to listen while their ears perk up at every whispered story. One boy, emboldened, repeats the tale of a neighbor's son who supposedly saw a spirit walking near the canal at dusk. His eyes widen theatrically as he describes glowing hands and a voice that sounded like rushing water. The older men roll their eyes, muttering that children should fear crocodiles, not ghosts. Still, you notice that later, when the sun begins to dip, those same men avoid that canal path. Quirky tidbit. Sometimes farmers painted protective eyes or small hieroglyphs on the sides of their houses to ward off evil spirits and jealous neighbors alike. Whether it worked or not, it gave people something to talk about. You remember when your aunt painted a crude falcon on her wall, claiming Horus himself watched her doorway. The whole village teased her for weeks, until one night a thief actually tripped in the dark and fled, swearing he saw glowing wings. After that, no one dared joke again. You lean against your hoe, half smiling at the exchange. These talks, trivial as they seem, are the threads weaving your world together. Without them, the hours would blur into nothing but dirt and sweat. With them, the monotony becomes a shared performance, a daily play where everyone knows their role. The grumbler, the storyteller, the joker, the skeptic. You even catch yourself wondering which role you are playing today. The conversation drifts toward food shortages in a neighboring town. Someone claims to have heard that the granaries there are nearly empty, that people are mixing barley with crushed acacia pods to make bread stretch further. Another counters that the rumor is nonsense, that merchants just say such things to raise prices. The debate grows animated, voices rising, gestures sharp. You listen carefully, not because you expect to learn truth, but because even half-truths matter. They shape how you plan, how you worry, how you measure the coming months. One man lowers his voice to share news of a priest accused of taking too much grain for himself. The circle leans closer, savoring the scandal. Whether true or not, the idea of a holy man caught in greed satisfies some unspoken balance. It makes your own daily burdens feel a little lighter, knowing that even the lofty stumble, historians still argue whether gossip was seen as dangerous threatening order or as harmless venting. You suspect it was both. A whispered story could topple trust in a leader, yet it could also keep neighbors from despair by giving them something to laugh about. And in a land where floods and famine always lurked, laughter was no small thing. Eventually, someone sighs, straightens, and says, "Enough talk. The weeds will not pull themselves." The circle breaks apart reluctantly, each farmer drifting back to his plot. You to adjust your tunic, stretch your aching shoulders, and return to the furrows. The chatter lingers in your ears, though, echoing like a soft song against the drone of cicadas. You glance back once, watching as a group of children chase each other through the dust, their laughter still rising like a counterpoint to the heaviness of work. The gossip is over for now, but the energy it left behind stays with you. Your hands may blister, but your spirit feels lighter. And in a world measured by sweat and sun that is as vital as bread, the light has grown harsher, the one's golden glow now blinding white. You squint as you bend to pull a stubborn weed from the soil, but before you can toss it aside, a shadow crosses the furrow. Not the passing shade of a bird or the silhouette of a neighbor, but something heavier. You straighten slowly, already knowing what you will see. Down the dirt path walks the overseer, flanked by 2 scribes. His tunic is cleaner than yours, his sandals less worn. He does not carry a hoe or a sickle. He carries authority. Behind him, the scribes balance, read pens and clay tablets, ready to record whatever their master tells them. It is not the sight of tools that makes your stomach tighten, but the sound of styluses scratching on clay. Numbers, once pressed into wet surface, never vanish. The overseer does not greet you. He rarely greets anyone. His eyes move like scales, weighing, assessing, calculating how much barley will fill your baskets, how many jars of beer you will owe, how many bundles of flax he can demand without crushing you completely. His gaze drifts over your ox, your plough, your nearly watered field. You force yourself to keep working because stopping feels like an admission of guilt. Historians still argue whether tax collectors were universally hated or grudgingly respected as necessary parts of the kingdom. In your bones, you feel both. You despise his watchful silence, yet you know that without grain in the state granaries, soldiers would starve, temples would empty, and trade would crumble. He is as much a part of the land's rhythm as the Nile itself, though far less generous. The scribes kneel at the canal, dipping reeds into ink, making quick notes. You wonder what they are writing. Numbers. Yes, but what numbers do they guess yields from the height of your barley? Do they tally how many rows you have ploughed by mid-morning? Do they note the cracks in your hoe handle, the tired gait of your ox, the sweat soaking through your tunic? You imagine their tablets filled with details that feel both trivial and dangerous. One quirky tidbit about these scribes: they often carried small bags of dried bread or fruit, not for themselves, but as bribes or trade to make their work easier. You once saw one slip a fig into a child's hand in exchange for leading him to a hidden irrigation ditch. Even power has its small tricks, its little shortcuts disguised as kindness. The overseer finally speaks. His voice is dry, clipped, almost bored. He asks if you will be ready for collection at the end of the season. You nod quickly, keeping your tone respectful. He studies your face for a moment, as though searching for hesitation, then turns his gaze back to the fields. He does not threaten, does not shout. He does not need to. His silence is heavier than any whip. You remember stories of farmers who tried to hide part of their harvest. Sometimes they buried jars of grain in the sand, hoping the overseer would not find them. Sometimes they stored barley in neighbors' houses, trading secrecy for trust. But the scribes are sharpened, and the penalties are harsh. People caught cheating often lost more than the grain they tried to save. They lost their animals, their land, even their freedom. The stories are repeated often, like cautionary tales, though you cannot help but wonder if they are exaggerated to keep you obedient. The overseer walks the length of your field, his sandals kicking up dust. He pauses at the far end, where the soil looks thinner, less fertile. You tense, wondering if he will judge it unworthy, wondering if that judgment will be your fault. But he only makes a small gesture to the scribes, and they scratch faster on their tablets. You will never know exactly what was written today, yet you know it will matter months from now. Historians still argue whether farmers feared the overseers themselves or the system that created them. To you, they are inseparable. The man may be just another villager elevated into duty, but the system behind him stretches all the way to the pharaoh's throne. When you look at his stern face, you do not see just one man. You see the weight of pyramids, the hunger of soldiers, the prayers of priests, all pressing against your fields. When the overseer finally departs, leaving only footprints in the dust, and faint lines on clay. The air feels lighter. You exhale a breath you did not realize you were holding. Your neighbor mutters something unkind under his breath, and you almost laugh. The danger has passed, at least for now. But the unease lingers. Their visit is like the shadow of a hawk on in a moment, but leaving birds trembling long after. You return to your hoe, gripping it tighter, striking the soil with renewed force. It is not rebellion. It is necessity. If they expect grain, you must grow grain. If they expect baskets, you must fill baskets. The soil does not care about overseers or scribes. It only cares about your sweat. And so you bend again, your back to the sun, your mind replaying the image of ink scratching on clay, knowing that somewhere, in some tablet you will never touch, your life has been reduced to numbers. The sun is directly above now, a white-hot disk that seems to burn the very air. The cool softness of morning has long disappeared, leaving only a dry, hammering brightness that presses down on your shoulders and steals moisture from your skin. Every step through the furrows feels heavier, every breath slower. R.A. is not just watching now, he is testing you. You lean on your hoe for a moment, tilting your head back to squint at the sky. The blue looks pale, washed out by the blazing center above. Sweat trickles down your temples and into your eyes, stinging until you wipe it away with the back of your hand. The linen tunic clings damply to your back, and the dust sticks to your skin in gritty patches. The ox snorts beside you, flicking its tail impatiently, its ribs heaving with the effort of pulling the plow earlier. Even the animal feels the weight of the sun. Yet the work cannot stop. Weeds do not care that you are thirsty, pests do not care that your arms ache, and the soil will not forgive laziness. You bend again, tugging at tangled roots, tossing them aside into a growing pile. Each motion feels slower than the last, but you force your body into rhythm. This is survival, not choice. Historians still argue whether farmers took midday breaks as a formal practice or only when exhaustion demanded it. From your perspective, breaks are not luxuries, they are stolen moments, snatched between the insistent demands of the land. You know you will sit soon, but not yet. There is still too much to do before the shade lengthens. A locust buzzes past your head, landing briefly on a stalk of barley. Your hand darts out and flicks it away, but the gesture feels almost futile. Locusts can strip a field bare in hours, and though you have not seen a swarm this season, the memory of stories lingers like a bruise. You remember elders describing clouds of insects so thick they blotted out the sun, wings clicking like rainfall, leaving behind only chewed stalks and silence. The thought sends a chill across your sweat-slicked skin. Quirky tidbit: some farmers believed clapping loudly or banging pots together could drive insects away from fields. It might sound ridiculous, but desperation breeds creativity. You once saw your uncle waving a flaming torch around the edge of a barley patch, shouting curses at invisible spirits, swearing that smoke and noise would protect the plants. Did it work? Perhaps, or perhaps the locusts simply had better things to do that day. Your ox lowers its head to nibble at stray weeds, and you push it gently away. feed is precious and must be rationed. The animal huffs as if offended, then settles back into the dust with a heavy sigh. You envy its ability to simply lie down when the heat grows unbearable. But envy does not change the reality. Humans must keep moving, or the fields will not survive. A neighbor trudges past, carrying a jug of water on his shoulder. He offers you a sip, and you drink greedily, the clay lip of the jar cool against your mouth. The water is slightly gritty, tasting faintly of silt, but it might as well be nectar. You mutter thanks, your voice rough, and he waves it off with a tired smile before continuing down the ridge. That brief kindness lingers, softening the edge of exhaustion. Historians still argue whether cooperation among farmers was genuine solidarity or simply necessity forced by the environment. You suspect it is both. Without shared water, shared tools, and shared laughter, you would not survive. But beneath the surface, everyone remembers that the overseer's scribes will count your grain separately. Help is given, but trust is always measured carefully. You resume pulling weeds, hands moving almost automatically. The heat makes everything blurred, sounds muffled, vision wavering. The buzzing of flies around your head grows louder, insistent. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey brays, its call sharp and almost comical, cutting through the oppressive silence of noon. You allow yourself a small chuckle, because, even at your most exhausted, humor sneaks in. The rows stretch endlessly ahead, shimmering under the sun's glare. You know you will not finish them all today, perhaps not even tomorrow. But each weed removed, each stalk freed, feels like a minor victory. The soil yields grudgingly, and you press on. By the time you straighten your back again, your spine creaks, and your palms are raw from gripping the hoe. You pause, taking in the sight of your field. It is not perfect, patches still choke with weeds. Corners look dry, but it is alive, and alive is enough. You glance up at Ra, glaring back at the sun as if daring it to scorch your labor into dust. The truth is, you will never win against the sun. You only endure it. But endurance is its own kind of triumph. You wipe your face, spit the dust from your mouth, and force your body into motion again. Because in this land, survival is not about conquering nature. It is about stubbornly outlasting it. At last, the punishing rhythm of noon softens just enough to remind you that even the hardest days allow for a pause. You lead the ox toward a patch of shade where a cluster of date palms stands tall, their fronds swaying lazily in the heated breeze. The ground beneath them is cooler, the air gentler, and for the first time since sunrise, you allow yourself to exhale fully. You lower yourself onto a reed mat that someone has spread across the dirt. The simple act of sitting feels decadent, almost luxurious, after hours of bending and lifting. You stretch your legs, feeling the prickling relief of blood returning to cramped muscles. Your stomach growls loudly, and this time you can answer its call. From a basket wrapped in linen, your wife pulls out the midday meal. It is nothing extravagant, but in this moment it feels like a feast. A flat round of bread, still chewy though baked 2 days ago. A handful of figs, their sticky sweetness glistening as she tears them apart. A small salted fish, its sharp smell softened by roasting over the hearth the night before. Beside it all, a jar of water, its clay surface still damp from being stored in the cool earth. You take a piece of bread, dipping it into the juices of the fish, and chew slowly. The flavor is salty, earthy, simple, but after hours of dust and sweat, it is ambrosia. A fig follows, soft against your tongue, sweet enough to balance the salt. The water washes it all down, gritty again with silt, but cold enough to make your throat sigh. Historians still argue whether midday meals were structured like this every day, or if they were more casual, snatched when hunger became unbearable. Sitting here with family and neighbors in the patchy shade, it feels natural, as if the land itself insists on this moment of stillness. Without it, the afternoon would stretch into an endless punishment. Children crowd around, their faces bright with excitement at the figs. One little hand reaches for a piece of fish, and you allow it, even though you know the portion is small. The joy in their eyes is worth more than a full belly. Your wife laughs as she shoos them gently, reminding them not to spill water on the mat. They laugh louder, ignoring her warning, splashing each other until everyone joins in the amusement. Quirky tidbit: ancient Egyptians sometimes flavored their figs with honey when they could afford it, making them into a kind of sticky dessert. Honey, however, was precious and rare, often reserved for offerings to gods or for the wealthy. For farmers like you, figs in their natural form are sweet enough. You imagine, though, what it might taste like: figs dripping with golden honey, rich and decadent. The thought makes you chuckle at your own daydream. A neighbor leans back against a palm trunk, telling a story about a caravan he once saw on the horizon. Traders from faraway lands bringing exotic spices. He claims they smelled of cinnamon and pepper, though no one in the circle has ever tasted such things. The group laughs, teasing him for making up details. Yet, even while laughing, everyone leans a little closer, imagining for a moment what a spiced fig or spiced beer might taste like. The ox snorts nearby, stretching its legs before lowering itself to the dirt with a heavy thump. Animals rest too, and you watch with a kind of envy as it settles into sleep. You know you will have to wake it soon, but for now, you allow it the same reprieve you allow yourself. Work will not vanish, but it can wait a little longer. The air hums with the sound of cicadas, their steady drone almost soothing when paired with the rustle of palm leaves. Your eyes grow heavy, and you lean back, tilting your head against the rough bark. You allow yourself a half-doze, hovering between wakefulness and dreams, listening to the quiet chatter of neighbors and the occasional burst of children's laughter. Historians still argue whether naps were part of the daily rhythm or frowned upon as laziness. In your world, it feels less like laziness and more like survival. A short rest now might mean the strength to finish the fields later. Without it, the body would simply collapse. You smile faintly at the thought that centuries later, people might debate whether you earned your nap. The shade begins to shrink as the sun shifts westward, reminding you that the pause cannot last forever. You tear off one last piece of bread, chew slowly, savoring its gritty texture, then brush crumbs from your lap. The children groan when they realize playtime is ending, but even they understand that fields do not tend themselves. You rise slowly, stretching until your joints pop, and gather your hoe once more. The ox stands reluctantly, shaking its head as if to protest, but you pat its flank and murmur reassurance. Together, you step back into the brightness, leaving behind the laughter and figs, carrying only the faint sweetness of rest as fuel for the long afternoon ahead. The afternoon stretches ahead like an endless corridor, hot and heavy, yet softened by the memory of figs and laughter under the palms. Your arms ache, your back feels stiff, but you shoulder your hoe and return to the furrows. The soil greets you like an old opponent, stubborn and silent, waiting for you to test your strength again. You crouch low, tugging at weeds that seem determined to reclaim the rows. Their roots cling tightly to the damp soil, almost mocking your effort. Each one you pull free leaves behind a clump of earth, and you toss it aside into a growing pile. It is monotonous work, but there is satisfaction in seeing green rows freed of intruders, neat lines stretching across the field like soldiers standing at attention. You pause often, not because you want to, but because the sun leaves you no choice. The heat bounces off the soil, rising in shimmering waves that blur your vision. Flies buzz relentlessly around your head, and you wave them away, muttering curses too low for anyone to hear. Historians still argue whether farmers saw their afternoons as the most dreaded part of the day, or whether routine dulled the misery. For you, dread is too heavy a word. It is not dread, it is endurance. The work is unpleasant, but it is familiar. You know the rhythm, you know the cost, and you know that if you keep going, the evening will eventually come. Sometimes the work shifts from weeds to repairs. You notice where the reed fencing has started to sag along the edge of the field, leaving a gap wide enough for goats or stray animals to wander in. You fetch a bundle of reeds, weave them together with practiced motions, and press the stakes back into the earth. The fence may not stop everything, but it discourages most intrusions. You smile faintly, thinking of how goats always seem to find ways around barriers anyway. Quirky tidbit: farmers sometimes smeared mud mixed with crocodile fat on small sections of fences, believing the smell alone would ward off intruders, both animal and human. Whether it worked or not, you have no idea. You have never had the stomach to try it. But you laugh, imagining a thief backing away from a fence that smells suspiciously of the river's most feared predator. A faint rustle in the crops draws your attention. You move quickly, parting the stalks until you find the culprit, a grasshopper, chewing contentedly on tender leaves. You flick it away with your fingers, watching it spring into the air and vanish into the distance. The moment is small, almost trivial, but you know that dozens of grasshoppers could easily become hundreds. Each pest removed now feels like insurance against disaster later. Your neighbor shouts across the rows, cursing at a flock of birds pecking at his barley. He waves his arms wildly, throwing clumps of dirt to scare them off. The birds scatter, circling in the sky, then land again a few rows farther away. You grin at the futility of it all, because you know you will be doing the same dance in a few minutes. Historians still argue whether farmers used nets, scarecrows, or simply endless shouting to protect their crops. In practice, you know it is all of the above. Sometimes you stick reeds into the ground, tying scraps of linen to flutter in the breeze. Sometimes children bang sticks against pots, running through the rows until they are out of breath. None of it is perfect, but every gesture counts. By now, the shadows have begun to lengthen, though the sun is still merciless. You pause again, kneeling to examine the stalks. The barley is tall, green, swaying slightly in the heated air. It looks healthy, but you know better than to trust appearances. A single dry week could undo everything. You trace your fingers along the stalks, muttering a quiet prayer to Renanutet, the goddess of harvest. Her statues may stand in temples far away, but here, in the rows of your own field, you feel closer to her than the priests ever could. The ox stirs nearby, swatting flies with its tail. You pat its side, grateful for its patience, and then return to your work. Your hands are filthy, caked with mud and dust, but you hardly notice any more. Dirt has become part of you, pressed into your skin as deeply as your own sweat. Quirky detail slips into your memory again. Once, when you were a child, you overheard a traveler claiming that in lands beyond the desert, farmers used iron tools that cut the soil like knives. You laughed then, not quite believing him. Yet, as your wooden hoe thuds dully into the ground, you wonder what iron might feel like. Would it make life easier, or would it only make overseers expect more? Sometimes you decide ignorance is kinder than progress. The hours slide by, marked only by the shifting angle of sunlight. Your body aches with a dull, constant throb, but the field looks better than when you started. Weeds are piled at the edges, fences are tightened, pests are scattered. You wipe your brow again, glancing toward the horizon. The sun has softened slightly, its white glare melting into gold. Dusk is still distant, but you can almost sense it. That thought alone keeps your hands moving. Historians still argue whether farmers felt pride in such small victories, or whether survival dulled even that. You feel it quiet pride, steady and simple. No one will carve your name into stone. No scribe will praise your persistence. But the rows stand taller, cleaner, stronger because of you. And in this land, that is enough. You straighten slowly, your back stiff, your muscles screaming, and look across the green expanse. The crops sway, whispering in the warm breeze. And for a fleeting moment, you believe they are whispering to you, acknowledging your sweat, your endurance, your stubborn refusal to give in. You smile faintly, then grip your hoe again, because the day is not over, and neither are you. The afternoon is slowly fading, though the sun still feels hot against your shoulders. Beyond the fields, a faint hum drifts on the air, something different from the buzzing of flies or the clatter of tools. You pause, resting the hoe against your thigh, and realize what it is: the low, steady chanting from the temple just beyond the village. The temple is not massive like the ones in Memphis or Thebes, but even a modest shrine carries weight. Its mud brick walls are whitewashed, catching the late sun and gleaming faintly against the backdrop of palm trees. The roofline is simple, but smoke curls upward from braziers, carrying the smell of incense. Frankincense, if the priests are fortunate enough to have it, or perhaps resin scraped from local trees. Either way, the air shifts, scented with something richer than your earthly labor. You lean on your hoe for a moment, listening. The chants are rhythmic, repetitive, words blurring into sound, like water flowing over stone. You cannot make out the exact lines from this distance, but you know what they mean. Prayers for balance, blessings for harvest, invocations to gods who guard both temples and fields. Ra is praised for his journey across the sky, Osiris for the promise of rebirth in the soil, Renenutet for watching over the crops themselves. Historians still argue whether common farmers truly believed the priests' rituals had power, or whether they nodded along simply because tradition demanded it. You feel both again faith and doubt woven together. On one hand, the incense smoke rising into the sky comforts you, like a signal that someone is asking the gods to be kind. On the other, you cannot ignore the fact that your hoe and your sweat seem to do more for your crops than any chant ever has. Your neighbor mutters something cynical as he works, gesturing toward the temple. The gods don't eat dust like we do, he says with a half-smile. You chuckle under your breath, even as you glance toward the shrine with quiet respect. Jokes are fine, but you would never risk outright insult. The gods may not eat dust, but you are not certain they ignore farmers either. Quirky tidbit. Sometimes farmers left tiny offerings at the edges of their fields, small clay figures of cobras or frogs, thought to ward off pests and invite fertility. You once shaped a crude frog yourself, leaving it half buried near the barley rows. Did it work? Hard to say. The barley grew, yes, but barley usually does, if watered enough. Still, the little frog remains there, weathered by sun and rain, a silent companion to your labor. The temple drums begin, a steady thump that echoes faintly against the walls of the shrine. Each beat reverberates through the air, faint but insistent. You notice your hands falling into rhythm as you pull weeds, each tug timed to the sound. For a while, the chant and drum merge with the labor of your arms, making the afternoon feel less like toil and more like ritual. You are no priest, but for these minutes, you too are part of the ceremony. Children drift closer to the temple, drawn by the smoke and sound. You see them skipping along the edges of the field, whispering to one another about what wonders lie inside. They are not allowed within the innermost chambers, of course, but they stare with wide eyes at the painted walls visible from the entrance. Stories of gods and pharaohs cover those walls' bright colors that seem to glow even in the fading sun. Historians still argue whether temples were seen more as sacred spaces or as community centers. For you, they are both. You bring grain there as tax, watch festivals unfold in their courtyards, and sometimes, when worry gnaws too sharply, you whisper prayers at the gates. It is not just holiness, you feel it is continuity. A sense that your small life is part of something much larger. The smell of incense reaches you more strongly now, mingling with the earthy aroma of your fields. You inhale deeply, allowing the mixture to fill your lungs. For a brief moment, it feels like your work and the priest's chants are not separate things at all. The smoke curls over the fields, blessing the barley without anyone needing to say so. You glance back at the crops, swaying gently in the late breeze. Perhaps the gods are watching, perhaps not. But the chant continues, steady as the Nile itself, and you cannot deny the comfort it brings. Even if the gods are silent, the rhythm of prayer makes the land feel less lonely. As the sun dips lower, the chanting begins to fade, replaced by the ordinary sounds of evening voices calling, animals stirring, the clatter of tools being set aside. You rest your hoe against your shoulder, glance once more at the temple's whitewashed walls, and whisper a quick thanks. Maybe the gods heard, maybe they did not. Either way, your barley still stands, your ox still breathes, and you still have strength to keep going. And in the life of a farmer, that is as close to a blessing as you need. The sun dips lower, painting the horizon with streaks of gold and copper. At last, the heat begins to soften, though the earth still radiates the warmth it has absorbed all day. You brush dust from your arms, wipe sweat from your brow, and straighten up. The field looks decent for narrows clear, fences holding, water soaking into the roots. It is enough to give you permission to leave the furrows behind. Your stomach reminds you it has been hours since figs and fish, and so you follow the familiar trail toward the village square where the market gathers at dusk. The path is worn smooth by countless feet, and as you walk, you are joined by neighbors carrying baskets of grain, jars of beer, bundles of dates, and little cloth-wrapped packets of onions. Everyone moves at the same pace, weary yet purposeful. By the time you arrive, the square is alive with noise. The market is not grand, just an open space ringed with stalls and mats, but its energy feels larger than life. Traders call out their wares, voices rising above the chatter. Donkeys bray, chickens squawk from wicker cages, and the smell of spices, smoke, and sweat fills the air. You feel yourself waking up again, as if the market itself injects you with new energy. You set your small basket of barley on the ground, ready to trade. A woman approaches, offering a bundle of dried fish in exchange. The haggling begins, polite but firm. You argue that your barley is fresh from the field, clean and plentiful. She counters that her fish will last longer than your grain in the heat. Back and forth it goes, a dance as ancient as farming itself, until you both agree and exchange goods with a nod. Historians still argue whether these markets were tightly controlled by officials or largely self-regulated by farmers and traders. Standing here, it feels like both. You know scribes sometimes lurk at the edges, watching, but most of the time the trade feels personal, neighbor to neighbor, deal to deal. Children dart through the crowd, laughing as they chase one another between stalls. One boy nearly knocks over a basket of pomegranates, and the merchant scolds him loudly. The boy grins cheekily before darting off again, the scolding already forgotten. You shake your head, amused, remembering how you once did the same. Weaving between baskets while your mother shouted at you, a friend waves you over to a small cluster of men gathered round a jar of beer. You share a drink, the thick liquid earthy on your tongue, and trade stories of the day. One man boasts about pulling a weed as tall as his own leg. Another tells of a bird swooping down so boldly it stole grain straight from his basket. Laughter rises, cutting through the din of the marketplace. Quirky tidbit: some markets were said to attract entertainers, jugglers, dancers, or storytellers who performed for scraps of food or coins. You have seen it once or twice yourself. A man balancing clay pots on his head while children shrieked with delight, or a woman spinning in circles, her colorful dress swirling like a dust devil. Today, though, the entertainment is just the haggling itself. Each trade a miniature drama acted out in the open. Your wife joins you, her basket filled with onions and a small handful of lentils. She grins, proud of her bargaining, and you nod in approval. Together, you circle the market one last time, picking up a bundle of herbs for flavoring soups and a few dates for the children. The smell of roasted meat drifts through the air from a nearby fire, making your stomach twist with longing, though you know it is beyond today's trade. Historians still argue whether farmers used these markets mainly to supplement their own harvests, or as social gatherings disguised as trade. To you, it is both. Yes, you come for food, for goods, for things you cannot grow yourself. But you also come for laughter, for gossip, for the thrill of voices colliding in the dusty twilight. The market is as much about human connection as it is about commerce. As the sun slips lower, shadows stretch across the square. Merchants begin to pack their goods, tying baskets closed, lifting jars onto donkeys. The crowd thins slowly, voices dimming, laughter fading. You heft your own basket, lighter now, and feel satisfied with the trade you made. You glance once more at the square as you leave. The dust still swirls faintly where dozens of feet have trampled. The smell of smoke lingers, and a few stubborn chickens cluck in protest as they are carried away. Tomorrow the square will fill again, but tonight it belongs to silence. Walking home with your wife, you feel the shift of the day. The weight of labor has lessened, replaced by the comfort of community. The Nile may sustain your body, but the marketplace sustains your spirit. And with the evening settling around you, both feel equally necessary. The market square slowly disappears behind you, replaced by the quieter hum of the village as families drift back to their homes. The air has cooled slightly, though the day's heat still lingers in the mud brick walls and the packed earth under your feet. You pass neighbors carrying baskets and bundles, exchanging tired but friendly nods. The mood has shifted, less trade and chatter now, more anticipation of evening rest. When you reach your home, the small hearth outside is already lit. The fire crackles, smoke curling upward in thin blue streams. Your wife crouches nearby, stirring a pot balanced on 3 stones. The smell is humble but comforting. Lentil stew thickening slowly, flavored with herbs she managed to trade for in the market. She hums under her breath, a tune you recognize from your childhood, something your mother once sang while cooking. You set your basket down with a sigh and lower yourself onto a reed mat. The day's labor feels heavy in your bones now, but the sight of home lightens it. Children dart in and out of the doorway, chasing each other with sticks, their laughter rising and falling like birdsong. You let them be, knowing soon they will tire themselves out. On a flat stone near the fire, a round of bread bakes. It is coarse, gritty with chaff, but the smell is rich, filling the air with warmth. You lean closer, breaking off a small piece before it is even fully cooled, ignoring the way it burns your fingertips. The flavor is smoky, nutty, familiar. Bread may never surprise you, but it never disappoints either. Historians still argue whether evening meals were large gatherings or modest, family-centered affairs. From where you sit, it feels simple and personal. Food is shared in small bowls, passed from hand to hand, with no ceremony but plenty of meaning. You watch your wife ladle stew into clay bowls, steam rising, and you hand them to the children first. Their eager slurping makes you smile despite your exhaustion. Beside the stew, you notice a small pile of broken toolsy hoe, cracked along the handle, and a reed basket frayed at the edges. Evening is not just for eating, it is for mending. You pick up the basket, fingers tracing the broken weave. Carefully, you begin threading fresh reeds into the gaps, tightening the pattern until it holds again. It is tedious, yes, but also strangely soothing. The rhythm of weaving echoes the rhythm of your day. Repetition, patience, endurance. Quirky tidbit. Archaeologists have found ancient Egyptian sandals stuffed with patches of woven reeds, showing that even shoes were repaired endlessly rather than thrown away. Nothing was wasted in a farmer's world. Everything could be patched, reused, reshaped. You chuckle, imagining centuries from now someone examining your patched basket and marveling at your thrift. To you, it is simply necessity. Your wife sets a small clay lamp on the ground, its flickering flame pushing back the dusk. Shadows dance on the walls, making the children giggle as they wave their hands in front of the light to create shapes. One forms a crude crocodile with its jaws snapping, sending the others shrieking with laughter. You laugh too, shaking your head at their imagination. As the meal finishes, you dip bread into the stew, savoring the thick, earthy flavor. It is not rich, not extravagant, but it fills your belly and warms your body. Your wife eats slowly beside you, her face soft in the firelight, while the children chatter between mouthfuls. The ox rests nearby, tethered, chewing lazily at straw. Even the animals seem calmer in the evening air. Historians still argue whether farmers truly felt gratitude at the end of such hard days, or whether exhaustion dulled everything into routine. Sitting here, belly warming, tools mended, family gathered, you feel something close to gratitude. It is not dramatic, not overwhelming, just a steady, quiet contentment. The kind that comes from knowing you have done what you could, and that, for tonight at least, it is enough. The lamp burns lower as the night deepens. You finish repairing the basket, setting it aside with a satisfied nod. Tomorrow it will carry barley again, as if it had never frayed. You glance around your small home, clay jars against the wall. Red mats stacked neatly, the faint glow of the fire. Everything is modest, everything is worn, but everything belongs to you. That ownership, however fragile, is its own form of wealth. The children's voices soften, their energy fading as the weight of the day settles on them too. One curls up on the mat beside you, eyelids drooping, still clutching a crust of bread. You brush crumbs from his cheek with a calloused hand and watch him drift towards sleep. You sigh deeply, leaning back against the wall, your own body begging for rest. But before sleep, there are small rituals yet to come. Duties that stretch beyond the family and into the unseen world of ancestors and gods. For now, though you let the warmth of stew and the flicker of firelight soothe you, storing strength for what comes next. The stew pot has been scraped clean, the bread reduced to crumbs, and the children's laughter has dwindled into yawns. The evening has grown still, the village softened into a low murmur of voices, punctuated by the occasional bray of a donkey or bark of a restless dog. The sky above has shifted from glowing gold to deep velvet, scattered with stars that flicker like distant fires. It is in this quiet hour that your thoughts turn from the needs of the body to the needs of the spirit. Near the hearth, you set aside your tools and gather the small offerings that have become part of your nightly rhythm. A handful of barley, a tiny splash of beer, and a sliver of bread. To anyone else, they may seem like scraps. To you, they are more than food. They are tokens of remembrance. You carry them carefully to a low shelf against the wall where a small clay figurine sits. It is crude, barely recognizable, but it represents a household deity, a guardian presence. You place the offerings before the figurine and bow your head. The words you murmur are quiet, almost whispers, but you believe the ancestors hear them. You thank those who came before for guiding your hands, for shaping the soil before you, for leaving you the patterns of survival. Without them, the fields would be wild, the tools unknown. You promise them that you will pass the same knowledge to your children. Historians still argue whether ancestor worship was deeply personal or largely symbolic for farmers like you. Standing in the glow of a clay lamp, you feel it as deeply personal. These whispers are not meant for temples or priests. They are meant for the spirits who share your blood, who watch silently as you sweat and endure. Your wife adds her own quiet words, placing a sprig of herbs on the shelf. It smells sharp, almost medicinal, filling the small room with its aroma. The children, half asleep, mimic you both clumsily, tossing crumbs toward the figurine and giggling when they land unevenly. You smile, because this is how traditions survive, not with solemn ceremony, but with small gestures woven into daily life. Quirky tidbit: some families placed bowls of milk or honey on their doorsteps at night, hoping to please protective spirits or keep away wandering ones. You tried it once, long ago, only to wake and find a neighbor's cat lapping greedily at the bowl. You laughed, deciding that perhaps the gods had simply chosen feline form that evening. Outside, the temple chants have faded, replaced by the softer chorus of crickets and frogs. You step out briefly into the night air, carrying the sliver of beer in a small jar. You pour it onto the ground at the edge of your doorway, murmuring a final thanks to the gods who guard the Nile and the land. The soil darkens briefly, then absorbs the liquid without trace. It is a small act, but it feels necessary, like closing the book of the day with the right words. Your neighbor does the same at his doorway, and the two of you exchange a nod across the narrow street. No words are spoken, but the gesture is enough. Each of you has performed the quiet rituals that link your homes together in invisible threads. Historians still argue whether farmers believed these nightly offerings truly altered their fate, or whether they were simply acts of habit. To you, the answer hardly matters. Habit itself is powerful. Habit brings calm, structure, and a sense that you are not alone in the vast sweep of the desert and river. The lamp inside your house burns lower, its flame flickering against the clay walls. You gather the children, coaxing them onto the reed mats, and watch their eyelids flutter closed. The smell of herbs, smoke, and earth fills the room, mingling into something familiar and soothing. You sit quietly for a moment, letting the stillness wrap around you. These nightly offerings may not change the floods, may not stop the overseer's tally, may not ward off locusts, but they root you in something deeper. The knowledge that you belong to a chain stretching back through generations, each one bending to the soil, each one leaving behind whispers for the next. And that, more than anything, steadies your heart for the day yet to come. The offerings are complete, the hearth is quiet, and the children drift further into sleep. The night air cools as you step outside once more, stretching your stiff back and breathing deeply. Above you, the stars shine in a scatter of bright points, more vivid here in the absence of city fires than they ever could be elsewhere. Their patterns are familiar Orion's belt. The river of the Milky Wand, each one seems to whisper stories older than the Nile itself. A group of villagers gathers in the open space between houses, sitting on reed mats and low stools. You join them, settling into the circle with a tired sigh. This is not a meeting about work or trade. This is the hour for stories. The time when the day's burdens loosen their grip and imaginations take over. The children, still not fully asleep, crawl out of doorways to listen, their eyes wide and eager. Even the elders, their hair silver and voices cracked, lean forward when the first tale begins. An old man clears his throat and launches into a story about crocodiles in the Nile. His voice is gravelly but steady, weaving images of monstrous jaws, green scales glistening under moonlight, and eyes that glow like embers. He swears he once saw one climb the bank in silence, its body longer than a boat, its teeth sharp enough to shatter bone. The children gasp, clutching each other, while the adults exchange knowing smiles. Everyone has heard the tale before, but no one interrupts. The familiar rhythm is what makes it comforting. Quirky tidbit: crocodiles were not only feared, but sometimes worshipped in Egypt. Temples to Sobek, the crocodile god, kept live crocodiles in pools, feeding them and adorning them with jewels. You chuckle quietly, imagining one of those pampered beasts, belly full of honey cakes, compared to the lean, hungry creatures you see lurking in canals. Another villager picks up the thread, telling of a mischievous spirit said to haunt the fields at night. According to legend, it tickles the feet of sleeping farmers, causing them to wake in confusion. You laugh, shaking your head, though a small part of you wonders if that spirit might explain why you sometimes jolt awake in the middle of the night with no reason at all. Historians still argue whether these tales were merely entertainment or subtle lessons wrapped in humor. Sitting here, you sense both. The crocodile stories warn children not to wander near the river. The mischievous spirit stories remind you to keep watch during the night. Every laugh hides a caution, every shiver a reminder of reality. The stories grow grander as the night deepens. Someone begins to speak of pharaohs, half men, half gods, who once walked the very soil you till. Their deeds sound impossible, commanding armies with a glance, summoning floods with prayers, speaking directly to Ra himself. You glance at your calloused hands, your cracked nails, and smile at the contrast. Whether the pharaohs were divine or merely powerful, your world feels far removed from theirs. And yet, their statues rise not far away, carved in stone, as if watching you from eternity. A boy, no more than 8, pipes up with his own tailor story of a jackal who tricked a lion into thinking the moon was cheese, only to laugh when the lion leaped and fell. The circle erupts in laughter, not at the story itself, but at the boy's earnest delivery. You clap him on the back, telling him he has the makings of a storyteller. His grin stretches ear to ear, pride glowing brighter than any star. The fire at the center of the circle crackles, sending sparks into the night. Smoke drifts upward, curling into the sky until it disappears among the stars. The voices weave together fear, humor, memorial, binding the village in a web of shared imagination. For a little while, you forget the weight of overseers, the ache of your back, the pests in the fields. Here, in this circle, you are simply part of a community, kept alive not just by barley and beer, but by stories. Historians still argue whether ancient folk tales influenced the myths recorded in temples, or whether the temple myths trickled down into folk tales. You suspect it was a circle, each feeding the other, until no one could tell where gods ended and gossip began. As the last story winds down, silence settles gently over the group. One by one, villagers rise, stretching, bidding quiet goodnights. Children stumble back to their mats, yawning, still whispering fragments of crocodiles and jackals. You remain seated a moment longer, staring at the sky, letting the stars etch themselves into your memory. When you finally rise, your body is heavy, but your heart is light. Stories have a way of doing that, taking your mind beyond the furrows, beyond the reach of scribes, into a place where imagination makes even crocodiles seem less frightening. You return to your doorway, glancing once more at the stars before ducking inside. The night is nearly complete. Only sleep remains. The circle of storytellers has dissolved, and the marketplace is long quiet. The village lies wrapped in the kind of stillness that only comes when the sun has fully surrendered to the stars. You step inside your home once more, ducking beneath the low doorway, and are met by the faint glow of the clay lamp sputtering against the wall. The flame flickers, casting long shadows that shift across the mud brick, transforming ordinary cracks into strange, living patterns. Your children are sprawled across the reed mats, limbs tangled, their breathing deep and steady. One clutches a scrap of bread, even in sleep, fingers curled tightly around it as if afraid it might vanish. Another murmurs something unintelligible, lost in a dream that makes his brow furrow. You smile faintly, lowering yourself beside them. Their innocence feels fragile, yet strong enough to carry the weight of tomorrow. Your wife settles next to you, her movements quiet, practiced from years of repetition. She adjusts the clay lamp's wick, lowering its flame until it is little more than an ember. In the dimness, the sounds of the village seep in softly, a distant donkey braying once before falling silent, a baby crying briefly before being hushed, the rustle of palm leaves stirred by the evening breeze. These are not disturbances. They are the lullaby of life continuing, day after day, night after night. The mats beneath you are simple, woven reeds that crackle faintly when you shift. They are not soft, not plush, yet their firmness is familiar, almost comforting. You lie back, staring at the ceiling beams overhead, wooden poles that creak faintly with the cooling air. The roof is flat, and you know that on hotter nights you will climb up to sleep beneath the open stars. But tonight you remain inside, wrapped by walls that hold the day's warmth just long enough to ease you into rest. Your ox breathes steadily just outside, tethered safely, its bulk a reminder of the day's toil and tomorrow's promise. You hear its tail swish lazily, batting at insects even in the dark. The sound reassures you. As long as the ox lives, the plough will move, the fields will yield, and the overseer's tablets will be satisfied. Historians still argue whether farmers slept soundly after such long days, or whether worry gnawed at them, even in dreams. For you, the truth is mixed. Some nights, exhaustion drags you into sleep so quickly you barely feel the mat beneath you. Other nights, your mind replays the furrows you left unfinished. The weeds that seemed too thick, the glance of the overseer's eyes. Yet tonight, the weight of food in your stomach and the hum of stories still lingering in your ears make rest feel possible. You turn onto your side, pulling a thin linen cloth across your shoulders. Its fibers are rough, but light enough to shield against the chill creeping in with the desert air. The children's warmth radiates nearby, and you instinctively inch closer, the comfort of family anchoring you in ways no temple chant ever could. Quirky tidbit: some Egyptians believed that dreams were messages from the gods, a way for the divine to guide or warn the sleeper. Special dream books existed, listing symbols and their meanings. If you dreamed of crocodiles, it could mean danger. If you dreamed of fields full of barley, it promised abundance. You wonder, as your eyes grow heavy, what dreams might come tonight, and whether they will be prophecy or nonsense. The lamp sputters once more, then dies, leaving the room in full darkness. For a moment, your eyes adjust, tracing faint outlines the curve of a jar against the wall. The slight rise of your wife's shoulder, the glint of starlight sneaking through a gap near the roof. The darkness is not frightening. It is soothing, blanketing the rough edges of the world and softening every sound into a murmur. Historians still argue whether night in ancient villages was truly peaceful or riddled with fears of spirits and thieves. You know, the truth lies somewhere in between. There are dangers, yes, jackals in the distance, the possibility of strangers, but most nights pass without incident. Tonight feels like one of those safe nights, when even the gods seem content to let farmers rest undisturbed. The cool breeze drifts across your face, carrying with it the faint scent of damp soil and river water. You close your eyes, sinking into that smell, into the rhythm of the ox's breath outside, into the soft sighs of your children. Your muscles loosen, your mind slows, and the day begins to slip away like the last trickle of water into the canal. Sleep comes not as a sudden drop, but as a slow, gentle descent. Thoughts blur into half-dreams. The shimmer of the Nile under the sun, the echo of temple drums, the laughter of neighbors at dusk. These fragments drift together until they dissolve, leaving only silence. And so, with your family beside you, your fields watered and your offerings made, you drift into the calm embrace of night. The stars watch overhead, the Nile flows steadily nearby, and your dreams carry you into a world where toil eases and the gods, for once, seem kind. Now the village grows still. The voices of neighbors fade into nothing, and the last ember of the clay lamp cools into darkness. Around you, the night settles like a heavy blanket, steady and unbroken. The air is softer now, touched with a chill that makes the linen cloth across your shoulders feel just right. Every muscle that has worked since sunrise finally relaxes, letting go of its ache, releasing into the quiet. The ox outside breathes in slow, even rhythms, its body a steady anchor against the uncertainty of the world. The children sleep deeply, their dreams light, their faces untroubled. You listen to them breathe, and it is as though time itself has slowed, stretched long and gentle, leaving you suspended in peace. Above the roof, the stars shimmer faintly, countless and eternal. Their light does not intrude, only glimmers softly, like distant sparks guiding your dreams. The cool air drifts through the small doorway, carrying the scent of wet earth and reeds, the faintest reminder of the river's presence. It soothes, promising continuity. The Nile flows whether you wake or sleep. Your mind quiets, thoughts unspooling one by one until there is nothing left but calm. The day's work is finished. The fields will wait. The overseers, scribes, the temple chants, the chatter of the marketplace, hold, have receded into silence. What remains is rest, the simplest and deepest gift. Let your breathing slow with the ox, steady and calm. Let your body sink into the mat, firm yet familiar. The darkness holds you safely, the stars keep their gentle watch, and the night is yours. The world drifts away now, leaving only quiet. Let go, let sleep take you.